Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cannon Puncture Show. I'm happy to bring you another one of our ongoing series of Game Advocates. Now, what's a Game Advocates episode? Well, thanks for asking. What we have with the Game Advocates is I bring on someone who is a passionate and avid player and game master of a particular tabletop RPG. Now, they didn't make the game. They're not getting anything out of this other than spreading the love and telling you why you may love this game too, or it might not be for you. So I am excited to bring on Stras Acimovic. Stras Acimovic is a consulting designer. Is that right, Stras?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. So a consulting designer. I'm gonna have to noodle on that. That's game design related, right?
Yeah, I work with a number of people that are working on games. I help them tighten up a system. I organize a lot of playtests and things like that.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Well, you're here to talk about a particular game. Now, what is this game you're on here to talk about? It's something about masturbating swords or something?
Okay, so the game that I'm advocating for is Swords Without Master. This is
Okay.
a game by Epidiah Ravachol. The original concept for it started in about 2009, the summer of 2009, and Epi's been working on it since. It recently debuted in Worlds Without Master issue 3, and it is a sword and sorcery role-playing game.
Okay, a sword and sorcery role-playing game. I've never heard of that. Who's ever made a sword and sorcery role-playing game? So what's the deal with this one?
So, first off, just let me address sword and sorcery really quick. It is a broad but interesting genre. It's often confused with fantasy. Fantasy, like Tolkien's fantasy, involves a lot of elves, dwarves. It's high fantasy. Sword and sorcery is a lot more pulled back. It tends to focus on characters, and in particular characters that are doing things for their own reasons as opposed to some sort of grandiose destiny or prophecy or whatnot. That's part of it too. There have been other sword and sorcery games out there. I'm blanking on them, but there's a couple of different Conan ones that have been around through the ages, and there's certainly other ones like Barbarians of Lemuria and whatnot. But Swords Without Master is the newest of the genre, and it's particularly interesting to me because one of the things that it focuses on very carefully is trying to emulate a sword and sorcery novel. It focuses more on the artifact of play. If you actually play it, you're more likely to get a sword and sorcery narrative rather than to play something like I don't know, a tactical combat game that's got like sword and sorcery trappings.
Well, yeah, but like, why wouldn't I just play Savage Worlds and tell a full story?
So, in Savage Worlds, it's a fine system. It's a great system. But one of the things that it doesn't focus on is, well, Savage Worlds, first off, it focuses on tactics. Like a lot of times when you're actually playing Savage Worlds, you're making decisions based on numbers. One of the things that Swords Without Master doesn't have is like stats. So there's no way to win by like trying to get superior positioning in terms of like terrain and figuring out what weapon does the most damage or whatever. So one of the reasons that you would actually want to play Swords Without Master is that there are these things called phases in it, and they're very narrowly focused into trying to create a very specific experience. In addition to that, one of the things that it accounts for is like this invisible audience. So for example, in the perilous phase, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make danger and combat super exciting. So the way that I could potentially describe it is something like a gladiatory combat arena. Like the Romans watching gladiatory combat, the gladiators were supposed to make things super exciting. They were supposed to make it dangerous. They were supposed to elicit sort of like gasps and awes from the crowd. So very similarly, Swords Without Master tries to create that sort of experience. Somebody watching it should be getting that kind of reaction. So what it focuses on is like the creation of the narrative as opposed to like the specific tactical moves and trying to win sort of like mechanically speaking. So basically, one of the greatest things about Swords Without Master is the story that you'll be retelling later to friends. That's kind of like the core thing that it focuses on. So other reasons to play Swords Without Master as opposed to something like Savage Worlds, it's lightweight. You can play it anywhere. We've played it somewhat by accident by sitting in a supermarket. I have this 2d6 ring, and we were using that at that point. It's easy to pick up and play. It's fast. Like you can, when you're playing a game of Savage Worlds, it can take like, you know, a session can be like 4 to 6 hours. You can play Swords Without Master in a half hour if you push it. More likely it's like an hour to 2 hour game, but you can continue the story and run with the same rogues and everything. The speed of learning is very high. Like to play Savage Worlds, you would have to like read the rule book, or even if you don't, even if you're learning it during play, there's some things that you have to explain. You have to explain like, oh, this is how initiative works. This is how, you know, the card system for initiative works. But for Swords Without Master, as a matter of fact, the first experience that anybody saw of it sort of publicly was Epi released something called City of Fire and Coin, which everybody learned to play the game as they were reading the actual the pamphlet that had come out, like the short game. So you need to know nothing to play. It can be taught very rapidly. As a matter of fact, like it's pick up and go, you know, off the bat. It's quick to play, and again, it provides a different experience, particularly in the artifact that remains after play.
Okay, so kind of walk me through. If we sat down to play the Stras, what would I be doing if I'm sitting down and playing this? So we're doing some kind of narrative. There's some kind of six-sided die. I'm a little confused.
2 six-sided dice, yes. So one of the things that all right, so let's break it down. There are 2 dice. They do, but mostly what they are there for is to sort of, it's almost like a little bit of a choose your own adventure novel. They will actually set the tone for the game. They'll set the tone for what you're actually narrating. So, like for example, if a jovial die is high, that means that, you know, your rogue will be laughing, and there might be like hot blood involved, and it might involve, you know, flashing swords, all sorts of bright stuff. And if like the glum die is dominant, you might be like, you know, sneaking through shadows, you know, drinking cool beverages, not speaking a lot, and sort of like inferring a lot, that kind of thing. So again, it focuses a lot on tone, but in terms of what you're actually doing, for the most part, you're actually just narrating. Well, it depends on what phase you're in. If you're in the perilous phase, you're raising tension, and you're by holding the dice and withholding people from actually being able to make progress by you know having dangerous things like hammer at them and do all sorts of badness. In the discovery phase, you're learning about the world. And in the rogues phase, you're asking questions. You're asking people to do something. So you'll give them a task, like show us how you rescue us from this prison, or, you know, show us how you defeat this monster. So a lot of Swords Without Master is about nailing tones, and it's also about being able to sort of phrase these questions and answer them in interesting ways that keep things rolling forward and give everyone sort of a rich set of ideas to work from.
Okay. Well, what would you warn a new player about when they're stepping in to try to play Swords Without Master?
Okay, so first off, be aware that you're expected to make a lot of stuff up at the table. A lot of games that are, you know, more traditional will give you a lot of the information that you need. Like in a standard GM player setup, the GM will narrate a lot of the information. They'll put maps on the table, so a lot of the information is provided for you. Swords Without Master does require you to actually narrate a fair bit of the world, particularly during things like the discovery phase. The other thing is that things that I'd warn people about, you need to make a character at least 2-dimensional. They don't have to be 3-dimensional, but they have to at least be 2-dimensional. So making somebody that has, you know, great melancholies as well as, you know, great mirths, to quote Howard's Conan, is definitely beneficial. The other thing that you kind of want to focus on is, so the phrase "Swords Without Master" refers to the characters, and one of the things that's important here is that you're playing. Epi refers to them as rogues, and what's important about rogues is that they're heroic, which means that they do not. They can do feats above those of mortal men. So, you know, Conan has this epic strength. He can topple pillars, but it's not necessarily crazy and out there in fantasy levels. The other thing is that they're rogues in the sense that they're not bound to anyone. So, like, even a king is bound to his subjects, and the subjects are beholden to a king, but rogues sort of exist out of that structure. So one of the things that's different is that a lot of people when they design backstory, they'll a lot of times like weave themselves into loyalties, or they'll definitely bind themselves down. A lot of times these rogues only function for their own reasons, like and it's not real. There's no real like morality judgment. A lot of times you end up stealing stuff and it's okay, and it's not like for the good of all or something.
Okay. Well, let's think about times that you've played Swords Without Master. Give me some examples. What are some of your favorite moments at the table?
Uh, um, let's talk about stymies and about some of the skill in this game. So this game is deceptively simple. A lot of the tasks that you're given are very, very easy, but the more that you play it, the more that you realize that there's a lot of subtlety to it, and there's a lot of little tricks. So one of the examples is during the rogues phase, you can ask people questions. So you can ask somebody, show us how we defeated this monster, but similarly, the overplayer, which is like the GM, can ask you a leading question that can be a trap. So one of the things that happened is we were actually playing at Dreamation, and Epi holds out the dice and he asks somebody how his rogue dies. So now one of the things that happens is yeah, it's a trap, right? So one of the things that happens is when you roll, if you roll doubles, it's called a stymie. So it negates whatever was supposed to happen. So if you were to ask somebody, show us how you killed the monster, and you rolled a stymie, you would fail. But if you ask someone, show us how you died, and you stymie, then you don't die. And Epi actually asked us 2 questions in a row that were of that nature, and each time we rolled a stymie, and we managed to overcome it. So there was this epic sequence where we were fighting undead sailors in a bar, and somebody did not die, but they lost their soul, and we as friends had to rush them before the sun set, and their body would depart, and then we got to ask them questions, and one of the questions that we asked the lady that was playing that rogue was how she was battling the minions of death to buy us time to resurrect her. So it was pretty cool.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. Any other highlights?
It's a standard sword and sorcery novel, so we've seen all sorts of things. One of the things that I really like about it is people really kind of like embrace the genre. So a lot of times you see like weird stuff, like we've been attacked by mastodon armies. We've met giants, like an entire race of giants that was taking a fast, so they refused to eat humans for like a month, and then there was a great celebration because of it and things like that. So there's all sorts of like little details, and some of them are great because of that glum die, and because of the fact that melancholy sometimes come out, you actually see a lot of things that you don't see in other games. Like in a lot of games right now today, like more traditional games, a lot of times will focus on people being heroic. So it's all hoorah, defeat the monsters, beat up the bad guy, we win, hooray. But in Swords Without Master, because that glum die comes out a lot more often sometimes, and there is this tradition of slipping and struggling. So like, for example, one of the things that happens during the perilous phase is, I mentioned this before, you can't succeed unless you're holding the dice. So sometimes an enemy becomes all the greater because you get that wharf effect, right? They're kicking around. That's the next gen wharf, but they kick around all of the. Oh, so maybe I'm digressing, but whenever in Star Trek they want to establish someone as a credible threat, they have them beat up Worf so that you know that they're mean and total badasses. So
Okay.
in this case,
I thought perhaps you meant something to do with sailing and a wharf. So thanks.
No, actual Worf with the Klingon. Yes. In Swords Without Master, that effect is in full force, particularly in the perilous phase. So if a monster shows up and you're not holding the dice, you can't succeed against it. You can do cool stuff, but you can't like push forward and say that you defeat it. Only the person that rolls is going to be able to make headway in the plot. So one of the things that's super cool is you'll see people try and get smashed, and it'll rend their shields and cast them against walls and roar in fury, and then somebody will come up with that like quick, they'll roll and maybe they get like a glum success. So maybe they sneak through the shadows and like find its weak spot or something. So lots and lots of cool like very, very juicy descriptive imagery, because you're focusing on tone, you're focusing on specific color in the narration. So
what do you see other players loving about the game?
So first off, the game's actually a little bit challenging. I mean, it's we're used to sort of thinking in a tactical mindset, or at least I am. Like most of the games that we play, we're trying to get into a position where our stats are at their best. We're activating teamwork. We're using the powers that we have in good combos, that kind of stuff. One of the things about Swords Without Master is that you actually get better at it. So like, there's a lot of games where like once you learn the rules, you know what you're doing. It's pretty much a question of like, oh, I got a new power, so now I learn how to use it, and then I'm good to go. I know what I'm doing. But with Swords Without Master, one of the things that's super cool is you actually watch yourself improve. And the way it's written is it has what's called the base game and the advanced game. So anytime, like, when you get comfortable with the base game, then there's this, like, massive plethora of additional rules and, like, one-offs and all sorts of things you can do. Like, there's new phases, there's rituals that you can invoke to do cool stuff. Like, there's the ritual that creates a training, like a travel montage or a training montage and things like that. It's really cool because it's really extensive and you can do a lot of neat things with it. So I think that it'll challenge players. It'll give them a chance to like improve themselves, and also it'll kind of help people think a little bit, I hope, about sort of how we frame scenes to make them more exciting, more fun to talk about, really cool to watch us play as opposed to just enjoying the act of playing itself.
Okay. Well, let's flip the script here, Stras. Why would people hate this game?
So you can't win at it. I know a lot of my friends really like having that badass character that they can tell stories about, but this game doesn't have stats. So one of the ways that you get better at it is you try and change, your fictional positioning. You try and get yourself in a better position, but it's not really the sort of game where you can get a bigger plus to your Attack of the Killer Cat. Nemo-chan. Hang on 1 second. I've got cat interference. Sorry, cat second. I apologize. My bad. In any case, one of the things one of the things, like, if people really like strong tactical games, and there's really nothing wrong with that, they're probably not going to be huge fans of this. And again, this game does ask you to do a lot of creative stuff. So people that just want to show up and they just want to control their character and, run through grid combats and stuff like that, they're probably not going to be too into it. We were actually talking before the show. Sometimes it can get a little kooky. There are ways to pull that back with some cool rituals in the advanced game. But that is a warning that if the table's not using some of the advanced rules, that might be a thing that can show up. So those are all reasons why maybe somebody might not want to play.
Okay. I could dig that. Well, Stras, is there anything about the game that I've missed or anything else you want to highlight?
Hang on. Ta-da! This is totally where you can get the game. That's one thing you didn't ask. It's part of Worlds Without Master. It's Epi's Patreon. It's issue 3. You can buy the issue separately, or you can subscribe to his Patreon and totally get it as part of the ongoing support model.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for that URL. We'll stick it in the notes for the YouTube version of this show, and then when it comes out in the podcast version later, then we'll also make sure that's in the notes as well. Stras, thank you very much for coming on and advocating for Swords Without Master.
No problem. Join the community on G+. All right.